Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Empowered Educator. Hopefully, you have had an amazing Thanksgiving week. I'm recording on Saturday, feeling the feels already because one more day and we got to go back. Yeah, vacation is never long enough, right? I have enjoyed every single one of my days off. I have been able to catch up on sleep. I have been able to catch up on work that I wanted to do in my business and catch up with time with my dog. It's a real thing. I got to see my daughter a little bit. She's married now, and they took a trip, and I was without her for the first time on Thanksgiving, but it's all good. All good. Having said all that, we're going to go back to some hustle and bustle. I always say the holiday season, I think, is extremely overwhelming, not because necessarily we're ending a school year or starting a school year. As school people, we don't really think in calendar years quite so much, right? We think in school years. But we are actually wrapping up a semester, preparing for the holidays, having to put all the holiday stuff in, and do some pretty important things when it comes to middle of the year assessments. And that's what I wanted to talk to y'all about today. As teachers in the classrooms, we know that we've been putting in the work. We have spent our time at the beginning of the year putting routines and processes, procedures in place so that our classrooms could be run well. We know that we have been digging into curriculum and getting past the first initial weeks where we review and see where kids are. And now we've really dug deep into these skills that our students need to have. Students are starting to get things a little bit better, right? They're starting to connect all of the dots when it comes to how we want them to respond when they have to respond either verbally or in a written response. They know how to show their work if they have to work through a math problem. They know how to conduct an experiment in a science classroom. And they are understanding how history repeats itself and that certain events in historical timelines really are so connected and related to things that are going on in our real world each and every day. That's because of you. That didn't happen by accident. It's because you have dug into that content. You have figured out the best ways to help students move forward and absorb all of that content and not just understand it, but be able to apply it to real life application. And now we are going to measure how students have done. Now, I think about assessments in a couple of different ways. So I just want to be very, very clear because I'm in Texas. If you're not in Texas, I'm sure I know your state has something if you're in the United States. If you're listening to this from somewhere else in the country, in the world, I would assume there are some benchmarks to determine how students are progressing. But Texas assessment is completely different than anything I grew up with. I remember coming my first year in 1995, and the principal who hired me said, "Oh, we have this little assessment. You don't have to worry about it too much. It takes care of itself." And then I got here and I was like, "Whoa, Nelly, hold the phone here because this isn't a little assessment." And as a new teacher, I didn't know enough to prepare my students in a way that they were not just learning the content and being able to apply content, but also being able to take that knowledge and fit it into an assessment system. And I quickly learned that I had to learn, and I got really good at it. As a matter of fact, all of my students, very few over the years, didn't meet the minimum standard. Not my first year, definitely not my first year. But moving forward, I had a lot of success in the classroom. That's basically how I got into the role I had as a principal. I was a turnaround principal. I knew what it was going to take to get students to be able to be successful on the assessments. so that the school could get the rating that they needed to have in order to stay in the performing, the average or high performing that the state wanted them to be. I learned quickly that assessment is a game. And I learned quickly that, as with any sport, I'm a runner myself, so we'll use that as an example. I don't go practice baseball to get ready for my half marathon every year. I practice running. We have to practice the way we play, in addition to learning all of the skills. Now, some people put that in the category of teaching to the test. Call it whatever you want, but I'm going to be honest with you. If my daughter, when she was in theater, was getting ready for a performance, and we wanted her to get Best Actress, to get whatever accolade or honor that she could possibly get, we needed to know what the standard was. We needed to know how to play that game right. And we needed to know how we were doing as compared to the tip-top score so that we could monitor and adjust and make things right. I even think about it right now, many states have gone to incentive pay. If you want more than just the teacher salary, and they tell you this is how you're going to get more, you're going to do what it takes to get more, or at least try your best to get as much as you possibly can. We all want raises every year. We all want better conditions, right, as adults. And so I think we owe it to our students, whether you want to call it teaching to the test or not, to be able to have them as prepared as possible. So today I want to talk about some of the things that I feel are most important. I share with teachers, I teach teachers, I put into our regular norms on the campuses that I ran in order for us to be able to get the best work out of students when it comes to testing. Because I promise you, tests can be overwhelming. The material within the test are not always the most incredibly motivating and entertaining, right? And if your tests are anything like what we see, they're long. They're very long. And students, they don't get rewarded for it. So why should we do our best? But we can change all of that with a few things that we do in our classroom. So the first thing that I definitely feel we have to do is we have to explain to students what these tests are for and why they take them. I've been working on courses for my Uncommon platform to record this week and into next week for the next drop of courses. And one of the things that I was working on was just motivation and student engagement. And when I was looking over all of my research from over the years and all of my notes that I keep myself and just thinking back to my own experiences, when students feel connected, they are much more likely to engage. And when they engage, they're much more likely to be successful. When something means something to them, I can't tell you how many times that first year I was teaching, I would hear my students say, well, why do I have to do this? And I'd say, because I said so. And then I'd step back going, okay, if someone told me that, I would question that all day long, right? And so we have to make sure students understand the why. So why do we take the assessment? What does it do for us? And I would tell them. And what does it do for them? I would, of course, think about the age level that you work with. A third grader needs to be explained completely different than an eighth grader or a 12th grader. And a first grader needs to look completely different as well. But when you sit down and you really understand what is the purpose of the assessment and how is it going to really affect our own teaching and student learning, and you can articulate that to students, it makes a huge difference. So number one, make sure they know why they're taking their assessment. Number two, make sure they understand the ins and outs of the assessment. I remember one year I was teaching third grade, and our test had a passage that had the back of a cereal box. So if you've been around in life for a while, cereal on the back of these cereal boxes, there used to be like these contests or these forms to fill out or these different things. And this story in particular was about a boy who wanted a basketball and he couldn't get the basketball for whatever reason, but the form on the back of the cereal box allowed him to get a free basketball if he collected so many cereal box points. I had a student ask me during testing day, do I fill this form out and how do I mail it in? We can't answer questions except for the format of the test, right? Do I fill in all the bubbles? Do I do blah, 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 blah? So I said, you have to do what you think is best. Do your best job. The student completely had a meltdown to a point where after talking to the principal, we were able to just disqualify his test score that year. So it didn't have an effect on me or the school or him. Because at the time, third graders had to pass the test in order to pass the grade level. And we didn't want that for him. But it was an important eye-opening experience for me because I needed to make sure my students knew you're not filling out any forms, you're reading these passages, you're answering these questions. So it changed how I prepared my students. Over the last few years here in Texas, we now have different formats of our tests. We have different question types. Sometimes it's just read the passage or work the problem and find one answer. Sometimes you have to find multiple answers. Sometimes you have to type in an answer. Sometimes you have to type in a whole composition. Sometimes you have to drag and drop things. So there are items over on one side of the page and the answers over on the other side, and you have to match them. Kids need to know that. I even think about the middle school I work in right now. And when I sit down and work with my students, they've been in school for many years, right? They've been testing on our state assessments for many years. We get them at fifth grade, so it's not the first time that they've taken the test. But sometimes they don't know what to do on a question. Now, they're not going to necessarily say in front of their peers, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Right? Especially middle school. So for those of you in middle school and high school, we can't assume that they know. We have to take that time to explain it. So again, some people might call this teaching to the test. I call this strategic instruction when it comes to test taking skills. We need to make sure our students know exactly what kinds of problems they're going to be responding to so that they can do their best work. And then finally, and this is one I think is the most important and sometimes the most challenging, we need kids to believe in themselves. My philosophy with assessment was always, I'm not necessarily looking for an end of score. I'm looking to see, did your score grow from where you were before? Growth is a premise that I stood on for every one of my school turnarounds, for every year in my classroom. And my students grew. It was very rare for students not to grow, but it wasn't always like that. I had to really, really think about what value do I want to give to my students? And then I had to know what that value translated to into as I thought about their student achievement. And for me, it was growth. Now, why growth? If I run half marathons and someone said to me, and I've run several of them, I'm 54. I haven't run the last 2 years, and I'm not running this year because of an injury. But if I went back next year and someone said, I need you to win that half marathon, I would look at that person and I would say, okay, then there's no sense of me doing it. There's no way I can win. I'm 54. I haven't run in 3 years. Da 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 da, da, right? There would be a laundry list of reasons. And I would lose my motivation to even try. But if someone said to me, hey, you haven't run in 3 years, let's just go out there and let's just finish. For me, that's doable. I've taken 3 years off. A growth point for me would be now being able to go and finish. I have a different mindset about that. And when we set these milestones, because then once I finish this next year, what could I do the following year? And what could I do the following year? Students are the same way. Kids relate to that completely. Let's give you this far, and then this far, and then this far. And eventually, if you keep making the growth we want to see, you're going to hit that finish line. You're going to hit that ultimate goal. But we're not going to hit it if we only expect the ultimate goal from the beginning. Unless we're a Ferrari, right? They go 0 to 60 in like seconds. I'm not a Ferrari. Kids aren't Ferraris. We're humans. So we need to really set those goals appropriately. And then we need to motivate those kids. We need to encourage them. We need to help them believe that they can hit those small milestones that will eventually lead to the finish line. So if you take away nothing from today, I want you to take my 3 tips. Number 1, we need to make sure that we are making sure the students understand why we're taking the assessments and what it means for them. The second thing, we need to make sure students can manipulate the test appropriately so that they can answer in their best capacity. And finally, and the most important, we need to motivate our students to be able to believe that they can do their best. And I do that by focusing on growth. Okay, y'all, have a great week back at school, first week of December. And I will see y'all next week right back here on the Empowered Educator. Oh, wait a minute. You heard me mention I'm working on content for Uncommon, the platform that's like a Netflix for all of you to get professional development sessions that are easy to access, timely. I'm not going to take up your entire day. You have action steps that you can go and implement immediately in your classroom. And it's just $30 a month. You know, you can't beat that because I promise you, you can't get staff development that's high quality for that price. And it's like Netflix, so you get to go in and look at a menu and choose what's going to be best for you. Head over to my site, uncommonedu.com. I'll also put the link in the descriptor and get yourself signed up today. This is an easy Christmas gift to yourself. $30 a month? Wow. Nobody does it that cheap. I can promise. I've been researching. So get over there, get the professional development that you need. Make this week a great week, and I'll see you next week right back here on the Empowered Educator.